Hello viewers, in today's session we are going to discuss about negotiable instruments and a lot of concepts related to negotiable instruments. The Negotiable Instruments Act was enacted in India in the year 1881. Prior to its enactment, the provisions of the English Negotiable Instruments Act were applicable to India. Even the present Act also is based on the English Act with a few modifications. The Act operates subject to the provisions of Section 31 and 32 of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934. Now, what is the Section 31 of the Reserve Bank of India Act? This section provides that no person in India other than the bank or explicitly authorized by this Act or any central government entity shall draw, accept, make or issue any bill of exchange, hundi or promissory note for the payment of money payable to the bearer on demand. This section further provides that no one except the RBI or the central government can make or issue a promissory note expressed to be payable on demand or after a certain time. Now, coming to Section 32. What is Section 32? Section 32 of the RBI Act makes issue of bills or notes punishable with fine, which may extend to the amount of that instrument. Now, what are the consequences of these provisions? Primarily, these provisions result in three consequences, and those consequences are: a promissory note cannot be made payable to the bearer no matter whether it is payable on demand or after a certain time. Similarly, a bill of exchange cannot be made payable to the bearer on demand, though it can be made payable to the bearer after a certain time. However, a check payable to bearer or demand can be drawn on a person's account with a banker. According to Section 13 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, a negotiable instrument means a promissory note, a bill of exchange or a check payable either to order or to bearer, whether the word order or bearer appears on the instrument or not. So, what we understand from this definition is, this definition explains what negotiable instrument is by using three examples of three instruments, and those three instruments are promissory note, bill of exchange or a check. In the words of Justice Willis, a negotiable instrument is one, the party in which is acquired by anyone who takes it bona fide for value notwithstanding any defects of the title in the person from whom we took it. So, in simple words, we can say that negotiable instrument is a written document which creates a right in favor of some person and something that is freely transferable. So, though the definition of the Act mentions only three instruments, there are other instruments can also be called negotiable instruments when they satisfy two conditions of negotiability. So, though the Act says a promissory note, a bill of exchange or a check is a negotiable instrument, but if two conditions of negotiability are satisfied, other instruments also can become negotiable instruments. Now, what are those two conditions of negotiability? The first one is the instrument should be freely transferable, and the second one is the person who obtains it in good faith and value should get it free from all defects, and he should be entitled to recover the money in his own name. So, we can say that there are two types of negotiable instruments, those recognized by statute and those recognized by usage or custom. So, those recognized by statute are those that are mentioned in the Act, that is promissory notes, bills of exchange or checks, whereas those which are recognized by usage or custom are those instruments which satisfy those two conditions of negotiability, and they are hundis, share warrants, dividend warrants, bankers drafts, circular notes, bearer debentures, delivery orders, etc. Now, this list of negotiable instruments is not a closed chapter. With the growth of commerce, new kinds of securities can claim recognition as negotiable instruments, and the courts in India usually follow the practice of English courts to determine whether an instrument can be considered a negotiable instrument or not. But certain instruments like money orders, postal orders, deposit receipts, share certificates, bill of lading, dock warrant, etc., they cannot be considered as negotiable instruments. Though they are freely transferable by delivery and endorsement, the problem with them is they do not satisfy the second condition of negotiability, and that is they do not give better title to the bona fide transferee for value than what the transferor has. So, let us now look at some of the features of negotiable instruments. The first thing that the first salient feature of a negotiable instrument is the transfer of property. So, the possessor of a negotiable instrument is presumed to be the owner of the property contained therein. A negotiable instrument does not merely give possession of the instrument, but right to property also. So, when a bill of exchange is handed over to me, I do not just get the possession of the bill, but the right to property that is inherent in that bill, I also get that. And the property in a negotiable instrument can be transferred without any formalities. In case of bearer instrument, the property is passed on by just mere delivery, and in case of order instruments, endorsement and delivery is required for transfer of property. Coming to the next salient feature of a negotiable instrument, it is title. So, the transferee of a negotiable instrument, transferee means a person who has received a negotiable instrument. So, a transferee of a negotiable instrument is known as holder in due course, and every bona fide transferee for value is not affected by any defect of title on the part of the transferor or any of the previous holders of the instrument. So, a transferee has received a negotiable instrument from A, B, C before him. If he is a holder in due course, his title is free of all defects irrespective of the position of the title of the persons before him. Then the third salient feature that we need to look at is the rights. What are the rights? See, a transferee of a negotiable instrument gets certain rights because of the fact that he is in possession and has the negotiable instrument with him. And some of these rights are: the transferee can sue in his own name in case of dishonor, and a negotiable instrument can be transferred any number of times till it is at maturity. There is no limit on the number of transfers. Till the negotiable instrument reaches its time of maturity, it can be transferred any number of times. The holder of the instrument need not give transfer of notice to any party that is liable on the instrument to pay. It is not mandatory on him. Another salient feature of negotiable instrument is every negotiable instrument has certain presumptions underlying them, and one of the most common presumption is that the consideration has been paid for. So, it is not necessary to write in a promissory note the words that consideration has been received or value has been received, because it is presumed. Though sometimes in some negotiable instruments certain words like that may be included, but they are only used to create additional evidence of consideration. Without those words also, the negotiable instrument is equally valid. Then the last salient feature of a negotiable instrument is the prompt payment. A negotiable instrument enables the holder to receive and expect prompt payment, because a dishonor means the ruin of the credit of all the persons who are parties to the instrument. It could result in a negative reputation to them, it could result in a loss of goodwill to them. Now, coming to let us look at what are the underlying presumptions of negotiable instruments. There are many. Sections 118 and 119 of the Negotiable Instruments Act, they lay down certain presumptions which the court presumes in regard to negotiable instruments. It means that these presumptions need not be proved, as they are presumed to exist in every negotiable instrument. Until the contrary is proved, the following presumptions shall be made in case of all instruments. And the first presumption is consideration, the most important presumption, that is consideration. So, it shall be presumed that every negotiable instrument was made, drawn, accepted or endorsed for a valid consideration. It is presumed that consideration is present in every negotiable instrument until the contrary is proved. Now, this presumption of consideration, it can however be rebutted by proof that the instrument had been obtained from its lawful owner by means of fraud or undue influence. So, if that is proved that A has taken a negotiable instrument from B because of fraud or because of undue influence, if it is proved, only then this presumption can be rebutted. That means then only it will be understood or taken into consideration that there was no consideration. The next presumption is date. In case whatever date, see, whenever a negotiable instrument is dated, the presumption is that it has been made or drawn on that date. So, that this need not be proved again. If a date is present on a negotiable instrument, it is presumed that the negotiable instrument was made or drawn on that particular day, unless the contrary is proved. Now, coming to the third one, the third presumption is the time of acceptance. See, unless the contrary is proved, every accepted bill of exchange is presumed to have been accepted within a reasonable time after the issue and before the date of maturity. This presumption even applies to those acceptances where the date is not present. Assume a date is not given also, this presumption is applied there as well. Whereas if the acceptance bears a date, it will prima facie be taken as evidence of the date on which it was made. Coming to the fourth presumption, that is time of transfer. Unless the contrary is proved, it shall be presumed that every transfer of a negotiable instrument was made before its maturity. So, it need not be proved again that the instrument was transferred before the maturity. It is a underlying presumption, it need not be proved again. The next presumption is about order of endorsements. Until the contrary is proved, it is presumed that in the endorsements that are appearing on the instrument, they were all made in the order, in the same order in which they appear on the instrument. The sixth presumption is the stamp. It is always presumed that every promissory note, bill of exchange or a check was always duly stamped. Even in, this is applicable even in case of a lost promissory note, a lost bill of exchange also, it is assumed that it was duly stamped. The next presumption is about the holder in due course. It shall be presumed that a holder of a negotiable instrument is the holder in due course. That means he has all the rights and privileges that any holder in due course has. If I am having a bill of exchange with me, it is presumed that I am the holder in due course and all the rights and privileges associated with the holder in due course are entitled to me. Every holder of a negotiable instrument is presumed to have paid consideration for it and presumed to have taken it in good faith. But if the instrument was obtained from its lawful owner by fraud or offence, then the holder has to prove that he is the holder in due course. So, if I am having a negotiable instrument with me and somebody says that I have obtained that negotiable instrument by using fraud or by threatening the other person, then it is my responsibility to prove that I have not done that. So, the onus of responsibility lies on the holder. The eighth presumption is the proof of protest. So, what section 119 of the Act says is, in a suit upon an instrument which has been dishonoured, the court shall on the proof of the protest presume the fact of dishonour unless and until such fact is disproved. So, now let us try to look at a promissory note. What is a promissory note? So, promissory note, bill of exchange and check, these are the three negotiable instruments as per statute. Let us first try to understand what is a promissory note. So, section 4 of the Negotiable Instrument Act defines promissory note, and what is the definition? The definition is, a promissory note is an instrument in writing containing an unconditional undertaking signed by the maker to pay a certain sum of money. Certain sum of money means a fixed specified sum of money to or to the order of certain person or to the bearer of instrument, right. So, the instrument here is nothing but the promissory note. So, what are the essential elements of a promissory note? The first essential element of a promissory note is it must be in writing. A verbal promise is not a promissory note. Only when it is in written on a piece of paper, either in blue ink, black ink or whatever ink, any ink, it has to be written. The only constraint here is it should not be easily erased, that is how it should be written. So, it must be in writing. And the second essential element is it must contain a promise or a clear understanding to pay. For example, I have to give 500 rupees to B, I owe B rupees 500, or I am liable to pay B rupees 500. These are all statements, where I am acknowledging that I have to give some sum of money to B. This is not a promissory note. When I make a promise to pay, then it becomes a promissory note. So, if I write, I promise to pay B or order rupees 500 and then sign, then it becomes a promissory note. It can also be like, I acknowledge myself to be indebted to B in rupees 5,000 to paid on demand for value received or for consideration received. That also can be a promissory note. So, promissory note should just not contain an acknowledgement to pay, but it should contain a promise to pay. The third important or essential feature of a promissory note is the promise to pay must be unconditional. That means there must be no condition mentioned or stated. So, the reason behind it is, see, a conditional undertaking it destroys the negotiable character of a negotiable instrument. So, therefore, the promise to pay must not depend upon anything that might or might not occur. It must be payable absolutely. So, I promise to pay B rupees 500 is a promissory note, but if I say I promise to pay B rupees 500 if he helps me, that is a conditional promise and that cannot be a promissory note. The next essential feature of a promissory note is it should be signed by the maker of the promissory note. So, the person who promises to pay, though it is he himself who has written the promissory note, but he has to sign it. Unless and until his signature is there, it cannot be treated as a promissory note. And there are no restrictions regarding the form or the place of the signature on the instrument. It may be written on any part of the instrument. It could, even illiterate people could also put a thumb impression, their left hand thumb impression also could be there. In case if the pronote is being signed by an agent of a person, then the agent, take for example, I am agent for A and I am promising, as I am signing the promissory note on behalf of A, I can do that, but I have to mention very clearly that I am acting on behalf of A. If I fail to mention that, then I become liable to pay the amount. So, the only legal requirement as far as signature is concerned is it should indicate with certainty the identity of the person. So, who is that person who is signing, who is that person who is the promisor, that should be clearly known, and the intention of the promisor to be bound by the terms of the agreement should be clearly known from the promissory note. Then who is the maker of the promissory note, that must be certain. The promissory note must clearly show who is the person agreeing to undertake the liability to pay the amount. In case a person signs in an assumed name, some other name, assumed name, he is liable as a maker because the maker is taken as certain if it is clear from the description, if sufficient indication follows from his identity. In case there are two or more persons who have promised to pay, they may bind themselves jointly or jointly and separately, but their liability cannot be in alternative. So, who exactly is the maker, who will pay the amount, that has to be clearly indicated. The next essential element is not just the maker, but also the payee, the person who is to receive the money. Even the payee must be certain. The instrument must point out with certainty the person to whom the promise has been made. The payee must be ascertained by name or designation, and a note can not be payable to the maker. It is only possible if it is endorsed by him. And in case there is a mistake in the name of the payee or his designation, even in that case the note is valid, provided the payee can be ascertained by evidence. So, I write my name, but I give my designation wrongly, but even then if it can be ascertained as to who am I, even then the pronote becomes a valid one. Even if a name of a dead person is given as a payee because of ignorance of that person's death, his legal representative can enforce payment. So, who is the beneficiary, that should be clearly established. And another thing about promissory note is the promissory note should contain a promise only to pay money and nothing else. So, I promise to pay B rupees 500. It cannot be I promise to pay B 100 kgs of rice or 100 kgs of wheat or 1 acre of land. No, it cannot be like that. A promise to pay should be promise to pay money only and nothing else. Another essential element of a promissory note apart from this is that the amount, the transaction amount should be certain. See, we said maker should be certain, payee should be certain, but apart from that the amount also should be certain. So, I cannot say I promise to pay B as much as I can, or whatever I earn in the next month, or however money I can save in the next month. I cannot write promissory notes like that, they are not valid promissory notes. So, the amount has to be specific. If you want, you can add interest to it. For example, you can say I promise to pay B 500 plus a 6% rate of interest, or you can say I promise to pay B $1000 at the prevailing rate of exchange, but it has to be clearly ascertained. It cannot be as much as possible, whatever is feasible, and things like that. Next, let us try to understand what are the parties to a promissory note, that is, who are the people involved in a promissory note. So, the first person is the maker. He is the person who writes the promissory note, who promises to pay the amount that is stated in the promissory note, or in other words, he is the debtor, he is the one who has to. The next person is the payee. Payee is the person to whom the amount is payable, who has to receive the amount. So, he is the creditor. And the third party to a promissory note is the holder. The holder could also be a payee or the person to whom the note might have been endorsed. So, A could be the maker, D could be the payee, in between it could be endorsed or transferred to B and C also. So, these three are the main parties to a promissory note. Now, having understood what a promissory note is, let us try to understand what a bill of exchange is. So, section 5 of Negotiable Instrument Act defines a bill of exchange as an instrument in writing, similarly like a promissory note. A promissory note was also an instrument in writing. So, similarly, a bill of exchange is an instrument in writing containing an unconditional order signed by the maker directing a certain person means a specific person, to pay a certain sum of money, again specific sum of money, only to or the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. Bearer of the instrument is whoever is holding the instrument with him at that point of time. So, a bill of exchange therefore is a written acknowledgement of the debt written by the creditor and accepted by the debtor. So, A owes me money, I write the bill of exchange and it is accepted by A. So, usually there are three parties to a bill of exchange: the drawer, the drawee and the acceptor. The maker of the bill of exchange is called the drawer. So, just now in the example that I gave you, I am the drawer, I have to get the money from B. So, I am the drawer. Drawee, who is the drawee? The person directed to pay money by the drawer is called as the drawee. So, in this example, A is the drawee, A has to give me money. So, A is the drawee. After the third party, the third important party to a bill of exchange is an acceptor. After the drawee of a bill has signed his assent upon the bill, he can be called the acceptor. So, in a bill of exchange, I have directed A to pay the money. I am the drawer, A is the drawee. Once A accepts, once A signs on it, then he becomes the acceptor. Apart from these three important parties to a bill of exchange, you also have a payee, an endorser and an endorsee also. So, who is a payee? The person named in the instrument to whom or to whose order the money is to be directed to be paid by the instrument is called the payee. He is the real beneficiary under the instrument. So, in this example that I told you, if I am directing A to pay money to Z, then I am the drawer, A is the drawee and Z is the payee. So, I am instructing A to pay money to Z. So, Z is the payee. So, the person who is named in the instrument and who is to get the money is known as the payee. And the next two important parties that we need to understand is endorser and endorsee. So, when a holder endorses or transfers the instrument to anyone else, the holder becomes the endorser. So, I have drawn the bill, I have asked A to accept it, but now after some point of time I transfer this bill to somebody else. I have to give money to them, I do not have money. So, I say now I do not have money, I will give you this bill of exchange. Now, this person becomes the endorser, and the person to whom the bill is endorsed, for example, I have given it to X, X becomes the endorsee and I become the endorser. Another party to a negotiable instrument is a holder. So, who is a holder? A holder is a person who is legally entitled to the possession of the negotiable instrument in his own name and to receive the amount thereof. He could either be the original payee or he could be the endorsee also. Then there are two other parties, drawee in case of need and acceptor for honor. So, what happens at times is drawee is not in a position to fulfill his requirement. Drawee is not in a position to fulfill his requirement. Then another person can step in and say, okay, fine, I will make the payment. So, that person becomes a drawee in case of need. Bill of exchange can be classified into three categories. So, the first category is inland and foreign bills, the second category is time and demand bills, and the third category is trade and accommodation bills. So, inland bill, any bill would be called an inland bill if it is drawn on a person in India by a person in India and the payment also is to be made in India. Or a slight variation to this, if it is drawn on a person in India residing outside India but payable in India, these two cases would fall under the category of inland bills. Any other category other than these would become a foreign bill. So, for example, a bill drawn on a person residing outside India by a person residing outside India and payable outside India, that is an example of a foreign bill. But however, a bill that is drawn in India residing on a person outside India and payable also outside India, even that is a foreign bill. So, where it is being paid and where it is being drawn, that is also important. So, this is primarily the classification between trade bill and a foreign bill. Coming to bills in sets, the foreign bills are usually drawn in sets of 3 and each set is termed as a via. What is the reason for drawing these bills in sets of 3? So, as soon as any of the set is paid, all the others become inoperative. The reason these bills are drawn in different parts is in order to avoid loss of miscarriage. So, each part is dispatched separately more or less on the same time, but the moment one part is paid, the other parts become inoperative. The next category of bills are known as trade and accommodation bill. So, a trade bill is one which is made genuinely for a trade transaction, for some business transaction, something is sold, something is bought, then a bill is made, that is a trade bill. But sometimes bills are drawn not out of trade reasons, but out of a reason wherein one person wants to help another person. So, A and B are friends, A needs money, goes and asks B for money, B is not in a position to lend money at that point of time, but B says, I can accept a bill, you draw a bill on me, I will accept the bill, you can go to the bank and get it in cash. So, that is one way in which I can help you, I do not have cash right now with me. So, this is known as an accommodation bill. There is no business transaction here, there is no consideration here. So, before the time of maturity, what A would do is A would go and return B the money and B would honor the bill at that point of time. So, this is an example of an accommodation bill. Next, let us try to understand what is a check. So, a check is a bill of exchange that is drawn on a specified banker and not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. So, a check is also a bill of exchange, but it has two extra qualifications. What are those two extra qualifications? It is always drawn on a specific banker and it is always payable on demand. So, consequently, all checks are bills of exchange, but all bills of exchange are not checks. So, a check must satisfy all the requirements of a bill of exchange, that is, it must be signed by the drawer, it must be in writing, it must contain an unconditional order. However, it does not require any acceptance like a bill of exchange is needed. We have seen who are the parties to a bill of exchange, we have seen who are the parties to a promissory note. Now, let us see who are the parties to a check. So, the parties to a check are the drawer, the drawee and the payee. So, who is the drawer? Drawer is the person who draws the check, that is the depositor of the money in the bank. So, if I am signing on a check, I am the drawer of the check, I am the one who has deposited the money in my account in the bank. And drawee, who is the drawee? Drawee is the drawer's banker on whom the check has been drawn. And the payee is the person who is entitled to receive the payment of the check. So, if I have an account with Canara Bank and I want to give X rupees 500, I write a check in favor of X. So, I am the drawer, Canara Bank is the drawee and X is the payee. Now, let us the last concept that we need to understand is holder in due course. So, who is a holder in due course? Section 9 of the Act defines holder in due course as any person who for valuable consideration becomes the possessor of the negotiable instrument and before the amount mentioned in the document becomes payable. And a holder in due course has to have certain essential qualifications, that is, there must be some valuable consideration and he should have taken the instrument in good faith, he should have taken reasonable care on his part to check whether the title is free of any defects, and he cannot be negligent. If he is negligent while taking the bill, then he cannot have the privileges that a holder in due course has. So, a holder in due course has a number of privileges, like the moment an instrument comes into the hands of a holder in due course, that instrument is purged of all the defects, and it becomes a valid instrument. And he's also can enforce payment from all the parties that are liable, all the prior parties that are liable. Thank you.